trial of Sean John Combs P. Diddy is over, and there are already being comparisons made all across the internet and commentary on that. But one interesting bit of commentary is Ramzi Khalid Ismail, aka Johnny Somali, comparing himself to Diddy and thinking he's going to get away with it. He's going to get off. We're going to talk about that today on The Legal Mindset, where we teach you to be your own judge. Of course, I'm Andrew Esquire, American attorney who's been covering this from front to back in the Somali saga. And we are going deep on this one because this is a great example. And of course, I have a PP. I've got a PowerPoint here. And this is a great example of comparing the American and Korean systems and some of the fundamental differences that separate Somali and Diddy, and how this is going to be dealt with completely differently in Korea, and how this trial has already gone down and will continue to go down much differently than the trial of Sean John Combs, aka Diddy, in the United States. So in case you lived under a rock and you didn't know anything about this, you can, of course, check out my other Fast Facts video on what went down with the Diddy verdict. That's out there. That'll get you updated in less than 10 minutes on what happened. But the verdict is in for Diddy. Diddy was convicted on 2 counts related to prostitution, but on the other 3 counts out of 5, he was not guilty. So out of 5, only guilty on 2 out of those 5. Many perceive this as him getting off, quote unquote, although I will say he still was found guilty. So ultimately, he will serve some time behind bars. He's not just going to get away with nothing at all. But compared to what relatively could have happened to him if he was convicted on all 5 charges, he could have faced life in prison. Yes, it is relatively light to that. And one person who is celebrating, despite many people being upset about this, angry about the Diddy decision, one person who's celebrating is indeed Johnny Somali. This is a tweet from Johnny Somali, and I always love how it got no likes or responses or anything else, but saying Diddy got off and I am next. So Ramzi Khalid Ismail thinking he is going to get off like Diddy. Now, one of the reasons behind this is because Diddy is actually one of his heroes. And you can see him here. Here's a video of him where he is actually talking to a minor in Israel. And this is something I reviewed in conjunction with him being investigated in Korea under the Child Welfare Act for various improper behaviors with minors across really the world. But this is a very interesting statement by Ramzi Khalid Ismail. Well, listen it.
I'm like B. Diddy, I'm like Epstein, I'm like R. Kelly, I don't care. For her, look, point right here. For her, I go to prison. Age ain't nothing but a number, but a dime ain't nothing but a thing. Oh my God.
So he's talking to this minor. He's comparing himself to Epstein. He's comparing himself to Diddy. Once again, horrible stuff there. And what makes him even worse is, you know, he's dealing with minors here and he's having that behavior of minors. But you can see he views Epstein, he views Diddy as his heroes, as his icons, as people he looks up to. These are the type of people that Ramzi Khalid Ismail follows and tries to step in their footsteps. So with that, we want to quash any hope that he would have that he might get a similar outcome to Diddy and that the system might churn out the same results as Diddy. So let's go into that and some of those differences here. So the first thing that's the key difference between Diddy and RKI, Ramzi Khalid Ismail, is that they're charged with different crimes in different countries. I mean, one of them is in the United States, one of them is in South Korea. These are different countries, and there's a various number of ways, which we'll go over today, how these countries are different. And the charges against Diddy were complex. They were very complex, in fact. They involved racketeering. They involved trafficking. These are things that require a state of mind, or what's called a mens rea. They're more difficult to prove than Somali's crimes. Almost all of Somali's crimes, in fact, I will say all of Somali's current crimes, do not require a mens rea. They don't require a specific state of mind. So the prosecutors do not have to prove that at all. All they have to prove is, did something happen? If yes, he is guilty. And in those cases, all the things happen. And just to kind of walk through the straightforward nature of RKI's crimes and the complex nature of Diddy's, let's talk about that. So racketeering, that requires a conspiracy, right? So a criminal enterprise, a criminal conspiracy, which once again, you have to put together this complex vision, this complex system that shows, hey, this is a criminal enterprise. And on top of that, you had sex trafficking, which once again, he was not guilty on that. So not convicted of that. Sex trafficking involves a state of mind. You have to knowingly do something and have a reckless disregard in your head. So you have to have a level of knowledge. it is always more difficult to prove crimes that involve that. Now, he was guilty on the prostitution charges, but, in Somali's mind, Diddy got off. So we're focusing on the ones where he's not guilty, all of which are complex charges. Now, let's turn to Ramzi Khalid Ismail's charges, not Diddy's. These are Diddy's. So let's go to him. Obstruction of business, the Minor Crimes Act, the deepfakes. Those three crimes are very, very straightforward. The Minor Crimes Act, essentially, if you've annoyed somebody, if you've done something troublesome, you're going to be guilty. And he's already pled guilty to that. So in the Korean system, he is already a criminal because he has pled guilty to those crimes, as well as 2 counts of obstruction of business. And as I've talked about before, obstruction of business only tests if the business operations, the normal business operations, were disrupted. If the answer is yes, you are guilty of obstruction of business. It's very simple. It does not require a state of mind or particular intent or whatever else. If you disrupted the business, that's really it. You're guilty of that. Now, he has pled not guilty to 1 obstruction charge as well as 2 deepfakes. But once again, the deepfakes also very, very simple. Did you distribute them? Did you show them on your stream? Were you making money? If the answer is yes, then you're done. And the simple answer to those is yes. There is not a complicated analysis here. This isn't something that requires you to delve into the mind of Ramzi Khalid Ismail, the very twisted, warped mind of that little shrimp. No, you indeed just have to say, did a thing happen? Yes, he's guilty. That's it. That's all. So let's move on. The next one is the nature of the system. There's 2 very different systems at play here. And this is very important for people to understand. The US system puts a lot of weight on trial. And because of that, in the United States, we do a lot of focus on trial analysis. And we have a lot of commentators, including fellow law tubers out there on the internet, like myself, that will comment on trials and will comment on what goes down at trial. But in the international system, particularly in Korea, trial is not always very important. In fact, the case is often decided before trial. It's often won or lost before trial. And the Korean system is heavy on pretrial. It's heavy on the law enforcement investigation, the prosecutor's interview. But if it gets to trial, you are pretty much doomed. The conviction rate is 95% plus. In many years, it's even 98%, 99%. But just as a generalism, 95%. Safe cutoff there. That is not mirrored in the United States. That is not a 1-for-1 as the United States, particularly with both local and federal systems combined. So when you look at this in the Korean context, if you want to put your resources in the right place, if you want to settle, if you want to end this, you have to fight the fight before you get charged, before it goes to trial, before you have an information filed on you and it proceeds to trial. You have to kill this at the police investigation stage or the prosecutor stage. The problem for Johnny Somali is that he did not cooperate with the police or the prosecutors. He fought them at every turn. He annoyed them. He kept committing crimes. He harassed them. He prank called them. He was nasty to them. He cursed at them. He did racial slurs to the police, to the judge. He made threats to the judge and his mother. Throughout the process, he has been nothing but antagonistic towards the prosecutor, the police, even the judge. And because of that, because of all that antagonism, he really misfocused his resources. Now, I'm not going to comment on the level of competency of his attorney, Johnny Somali, Ramzi Khalid Ismail's attorney, because he does now have a paid private attorney. However, I can say this, he does not have the funding that Diddy did to buy a high-tier level lawyer, like the white glove lawyer of Korea. He doesn't simply have those funds. And even if he did, even the best lawyer in Korea doesn't necessarily change the conviction rate. That doesn't really move the needle in terms of that conviction. So because he misapplied his resources and because really he focused on Better Call Hank, that's of course his top ally, Hank Yu there, in a parody of Better Call Saul, because he trusted Hank in the pre-trial phase, because Hank was really acting as his attorney. Even we have a quote from Hank where Hank says, well, I'm kind of like his representation too. Well, that's the problem. Hank led you down this path of not taking anything seriously until it was too late, until it was at trial. And because Hank led you down this path, you are now in deep, deep trouble, Ramzi, because you didn't take anything seriously until it was too late. You really took it lightly. And now you know you're in deep trouble and you're going to be in Korea at this trial for a long time with severe consequences. We even now have a victim that's come up and put out a petition for severe punishment. So that's all thanks to Hank not, giving you the right advice and not nipping this in the bud. Let's also talk about the nature of the trial. The trial in the US, the trial that Diddy faced and the trial that Ramsey faced are completely different. In the US system, we almost exclusively use juries for criminal trials. Whereas in the Korean system, they typically have a single judge. A jury is very, very rare. So we go from two systems, one where a jury is the presumption in the United States, the general presumption, versus where a jury is exceptional. It's for major cases. And he will not have, Ramsey Cletus will not have at any point a jury. That is not going to happen for him. Because of that, there is no ability to influence the emotion of the jury. One big power that probably came into play in the Diddy case is with effective defense counsel, they would play on the emotions of the jury. They would work the jury. They would make the jury more sympathetic towards Diddy. That cannot happen here. The judge is really not going to have any sympathetic emotion based on how Johnny acts in court. And moreover, he's threatened the judge. So that's something that the one single fact finder, the judge, has to take into account that, hey, this guy has threatened you and your family. He's threatened your mother, right? So that's the only person he could appeal to. And he screwed that up. Not that the judge would be impartial in any way. This judge seems very fair, straightforward, all business. And Korean judges also do not like split decisions. They prefer either all guilty or not guilty. So in the Diddy case, we had a split decision. He was guilty on 2 accounts and he was not guilty on 3. In this, it's more likely he's guilty on all than anything else. And since he's already pled guilty to 4 counts, the judge is more likely to look at the others and say, yeah, you're probably guilty. It's very rare in Korea to see it split, see the charges split. Although it can happen, this is the tendency of the two systems. And, we see here in the court sketches, and of course, there are no cameras in federal courtrooms in the United States. But in the Diddy trial, you can see the emotions playing in terms of Diddy himself, his attorneys, the witness on the stand playing video, the judge. The way this impacts the jury, the way this would impact the jury is absolutely massive and cannot be understated. The last thing is sentencing. And this is a huge difference between the Korean system and the US system. Once again, they are not the same. Korea does not sentence exactly like the United States. And one thing is, Diddy has mitigating circumstances. And I know that sounds crazy. We'll talk about them in a second, but he has mitigating circumstances. He also has aggravating circumstances like the number of victims at play, etc., some of the strength of the evidence. But RKI has almost exclusively aggravating factors. In fact, we went through the factors for the sentencing guidelines in Korea on one of my past streams, and I've got a fast facts as well on that. And we couldn't find a single mitigating factor, not a single factor that went in Ramsey Khalid Ismail's favor. In fact, under the Korean system, because he has multiple crimes and he's pled guilty already, he's already a repeat offender because he's committed those multiple crimes. So he already comes in as a repeat offender, unlike Diddy in the perception of the Korean sentencing guidelines. The other thing is that Ramsey is not going to get any credit for time served. Now, right now, he's running around freely with Hank, and he's bragging about that. He's having a grand old time. Well, guess what? The Korean system is smart. It knows that if it holds you, not only do they have to pay for your food and pay for your clothing, but they often have to give you credit for time served. They have to give you credit against that sentence. Well, they don't do that. And because they're not going to do that, it's going to look much different. So here we have the Diddy sentencing table. And I do explain this more in detail on my other video on the Diddy verdict. If you want to see that, go check that video out. You can also like this video if you're liking that content. But to explain this quickly, if you have no criminal history, you're going to be in this first category. Category 1 for no criminal history. Diddy did not have a previous criminal history. Then for the crime in which he was convicted, the prostitution charge, that is at level 14. That's the power level on this offense level here on this chart. So you go to 14 and you go 15 to 21, which is months of imprisonment. So Diddy, under the guidelines, is the average is 15 to 21 months minus he served 10 months in jail already. So you have to deduct that. So the expected average would be 5 to 11 months. Now, mind you, the judge, just like in Korea, this is a similarity in Korea, the judge does have leeway to move that up. And the judge may very well move that up. But the guess, based on the guidelines, is 5 to 11 months. We've also done the same analysis in Johnny Somali's case. Let's look at that. And we've done it several times. This is the sentencing chart for Johnny Somali. And we already know, because of the petition for severe punishment, that he is not going to get a mitigated sentence, a mitigated minimum. He's probably not going to get the default either. He's probably going to be in the aggravated category. So when we look at how much time he's going to serve, it's probably between 4 years and 3 months and 12 years. So the prediction, the guidelines right now would say between 4 years and 3 months, or 12 years. That is a massive, massive, massive difference between Johnny Somali and Diddy, because the difference between facing 5 to 11 months versus 4 years to 12 years is absolutely huge. And I think that's something that Johnny needs to come to terms with. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about both of these trials? Which one were you really interested in following? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next one.